Thank you for joining us for this afternoon on the TeleClass regarding the grazing aspects of the dairy, as well as any other cattle, I should probably say. This is our dairy TeleClass scheduled to go through, but it's all about looking at managing our resources the way that we would like to manage them. I'm going to go through a couple different examples. One of them is actually going to go through a bit of our background to start with. The reason I want to do that is I would like to have everyone aware that when we're really coming at this from a, how could I say, husbandmanship, which has to do with the management, the entire aspect of managing the enterprise, it's way deeper than just soil fertility or just the health of the animals or just the fact that I want to get milk from cows or anything in that order. I would ask everyone to kind of draw themselves back and say, what's our 30,000 foot level viewpoint of what we're trying to accomplish? And it comes down to we're trying to accomplish so that the family farm can thrive in all different enterprises. This happens to be in a dairy enterprise that we're talking about, but we really want to look at this from a big picture point of view. How do we harvest the most sun to get through our resources, whether it's soil building and or livestock management and sustenance, etc.? Because ultimately the only thing that we really have that we are given to us that we can utilize is the sun energy. As a matter of fact, I really would like to talk about this sun energy for a moment. But before I do, I would like to give you a little bit of an introduction. So in the beginning of our training, and it's a longer story than I will talk about, but in brief, we went through 7.5 years worth of training on renewable farming systems. And that meant that as we farmed our farms, it renewed itself. It ended up improving itself. And what that 7.5 years worth of training did, which happened to be experiential training, we had to experience it, we had to make it happen before our training could advance. Well, this type of training got us to be able to truly make a difference. As you walk in the fields, you dig in the soil, you look at the roots, and you look what you need to do. What are those inputs that you're looking to? Okay, why is it called renewable? Renewable is saying that it renews itself. How does that happen? Does it mean that I have bought a mine of minerals and I am able to just really freely use minerals out of a certain mine or many different mines, and I'm putting these minerals out in the field? Well, that's a part of it. That may be a piece of it. But I don't think you have to own a mine. You don't have to own a rock quarry. What I'm trying to look at and have you look at with me is the thing that can renew soil is literally the sun. And it is the sun that ends up making things a lot more attractive for us to work with. And it is in that vein I'd like to talk about this. Photosynthesis ends up doing so many different transactions from the sun, from the atmospheric air, those two different ones, and interacting and making things happen at the root tip level. Those special interactions we call exudates of material coming out of the tip of the roots are simple glucose sugar formations, or they are the pieces of photosynthesis that the sun got into the plant that allows the plant to grow. And by far the most of the growth comes from this, not from the soil. Again, I'd like to relate to you about this 5-pound tree this guy planted in exactly 200 pounds of soil, and 5 years later the 5-pound tree had gained 159 pounds to now weigh 164. And yet only 2 ounces of the soil was used to gain that 159 pounds. More dramatically said, that is 2,544 ounces of gain. Only 2 of it came from the soil. 2,542 remaining ounces did not come from anything but the atmospheric air the photosynthesis process of the sun energy, and the CO2 coming out of the soil. Those are the reasons that this really has a phenomena that I can talk to you about, renewing soils. It comes from the sun, and our ability to take that sun energy and put into our soils is directly proportional on how we're going to gain in benefiting our own soils. That's pretty huge. We've got to deal with, we are wanting to capture sun, harvest more sun, and turn it into resources for animals and for land, etc. And so when you look at becoming profitable and thriving as a farm, we have got to be able to harvest more sun. It has been said that the sun energy is what everything ends up revolving around. Even though we don't give it that credit, that's an amazing statement. There's also a tremendous amount of other spiritual applications that I could make as well. I would just like to be sure that we all get this. We really are able to harvest more sun if we pay attention. And so when I look at harvesting more sun, there's just a few things I'd like to really talk about that really make a difference in doing that. And I'm going to go through just a bit of a hypothetical example. When we use the harvesting sun phenomena, we're going to do two things. One of them is, what's really, really beneficial is our inputs that we put on this year can benefit each year following this year up to 5 years from now. I go on in my seminars talking about a hypothetical example. If you, for example, were putting on materials in this kind of category, which basically we make humus out of photosynthate substrate, put it into protein, and it is that humus protein that we really get to harvest year after year, the same amount as we go forward. Even though it becomes lesser in quantity, that's the same material 5 years from now, still getting at least 10% of what we put on this year. And when you look at that, that's exponential benefit. That is huge. And so taking this sun energy, putting it into a humus protein, and using it out in the soil, we are trying to make so we get the most resourceful energy from our sun to last us the longest and give us the greatest amount of return on investment, and become fun to farm again. I love that. It's becoming fun to farm again under that program. There are many, many success stories out there. People that do not even know anything about us that end up harvesting more sun and get some big wow factors. I only want to point that out for one specific purpose. It's much bigger than us. This aspect about harvesting sun is within reach of every farm out there. And with that, I'd like to go into a little bit of a story about, and I have the gentleman on the call, Gerald Keller. And Gerald, if I say something that is not in line with what you have seen, if I happen to say your story wrong, that's fine. I just wanted to give a little bit of it. If you look at what he has been able to do in Georgia, he's from Georgia. The state average stocking rate in grazing, for example, is 1 cow-calf pair per acre per year, who has been on a program using humus protein in a liquid form for up, in this story I'm going to talk about, he's been doing it since 2014, which is 8 years, but at the end of the first 4 years has been able to prove that he's being able to go between 3 and 5 times the state average of stocking rate and end up with a lot less weeds and a lot more fertile soil, more fertile grass, etc. The story is a beautiful one, and perhaps he wants to say more about it when he is responding back to us. But these are the things that happen when you are able to harvest more sun. Yeah, we tend to focus on it's about humus protein, but let's really actually understand the bigger picture. We're taking sun photosynthesis from the sun, and we're actually reconverting it into a humus protein And it is that gives us the big bang for our buck. And that really is an amazing story when you listen to what Gerald has ended up with in his situation. He has made a huge difference in his area simply because of what he's happened to come across, and that is to be able to use this humus protein. A couple more things that is pretty spectacular. If you ever get an opportunity, stop in and see him. Whereas they used to have weeds in their pastures, it is simply weed-free and has been managed in such a manner that they didn't use any chemicals to get there. And so I want to go into talking about pasture management as well as hay ground management, etc. But one of the reasons that Gerald has made such a good success is he listened very well and followed those instructions. For example, we had mentioned that we really need to make sure that behind every grazing, and he was doing some rotational grazing, I believe, he was needing to be sure that he came in and cut the remaining stems and taller plants that the cattle did not graze. In other words, eliminate the competition. Always, always, behind every grazing until you get things humming. And even then, after that, it still is very beneficial if you can come back and simply cut the tall grasses. We're suggesting 4 to 6 inches in height, depending on how far down you grazed it. We don't want to get it cut low, but every tall remaining blade of grass hinders 30 or more grasses around it because both of them are struggling from a competition point of view. If everything's brought down to the same heights, there's a dramatic increase in benefit. And by managing his pastures this way, where we had another phenomena, and that was between every 25 and 32 days or so, make sure that you graze it or cut it. We wanted to have that managed. Now, I realize that every year there's a certain amount of our pastures that we do not do that. We want to stockpile them for the coming fall and winter. I do understand and I recognize and acknowledge that freely. But as a rule, you want to take your farm and rotate it through the intense management and through the stockpiling management so that every area gets to have at least some impact on an every other year basis. And so if you manage your stuff right, putting on your humus extract, all of those things that he was doing, you're able to harvest a lot more sun. Now, I think maybe someone interrupted. If there's someone that would like to speak up, you're fine. Anyone have something to say?
Edwin, this is Steve. Can you hear me?
Sure. I can. Thank you.
Would you mind going through my biggest aha, which was those tall ungrazed plants were sending different signals to the biology than the stressed grazed plants?
Absolutely. Keep going. You are on track. Yes, I would like for you to go ahead and share this.
You know it, but that was, for me, that was the aha of the whole 3-day class. Maybe I'm a little slower dense or whatever, but that was huge.
Not.
For me to hear that. That was huge.
No. Yeah, no, I appreciate you tag teaming with me here, Steve. Thank you for interrupting there. No, you're not being slow in getting that. Let me tell you how many times I have seen this happen in a lot of different places. I present in Australia and different places. In fact, plan on doing that again next spring. And it's everywhere I go that people have been listening to managing their grasses, but they never have really caught on to the fact that working with nature allows nature to work for you. And this is just simply helping nature out by making so nobody has to compete against each other. Therefore, all of the energy is equally put into making a lot more photosynthesis available for your livestock. Does that make sense, Steve?
It does to me. I just didn't want anybody to think, all we're doing here is having to put more work in with this clipping. I understood it was vitally important after listening to you talk about the signals and the amount of time it took for the certain kind of biology to show up to bring more sulfur to the plant or phosphorus to the plant or whatever, and how quickly that can happen. But if it's getting conflicting signals, the amount that's brought forth is not to the optimum amount.
No, I appreciate you commenting about this. Thank you for speaking up like that, Steve. And also, I would like to say this for everyone on the call. It is a great privilege to have you on the call, and I look forward to teaching some more conferences together with you. It has been such a blessing. When you stop and think about, Steve, how to handle the livestock the way that you have learned, it is about letting nature work for you and not against you. Is that not true?
Absolutely.
I appreciated that privilege, and I felt like, in my mind, I felt like this is one of those things that we really want to make sure we are working with to benefit all of our customers, our farms, the people that listen in on this call, that they can be benefited. Because after all, Steve, both of us are on this highly motivated run, if you would, of benefiting the farm so that the farm can thrive. So yeah, thank you for that. I wanted to also get into a piece of this in terms of the actual managing the pastures and so on. And Steve, for that, I would like to have you kind of chime in, and then I'd also want you to talk about selecting for profit in terms of your livestock, particularly in cattle. And this goes for dairy as well as beef, in my opinion. But my point just is, Steve, when you interact with me here, I'd like to have us bring out a few things that we together can do. It is not just about our soil fertility, as we just now pointed out, the technique of keeping the competition eliminated so we get the maximum regrowth. The technique of managing our grasses in such a way that benefits us the most, have a lot other things we can do with it, and so on. Would you mind talking about, for example, I felt like we were really blessed with your mineralization of perhaps even having a separate water tank to help with this, and or an occasional usage of the existing water tank. Either way, would you kind of go through that process of how you do it? I feel very seriously that so many people could benefit from hearing you.
Okay, Edwin, I'd be happy to. Is there anybody else that has a comment on what Edwin said before I get into this mineral water?
Very good point. Very good question.
Hearing none. Kind of going back to that 30,000 foot view, most of our farms, unless you've been doing stuff like Edwin and Gerald for a while, we are short of minerals, and we've got too many of the neighbors' toxins. And the fastest, least expensive way that I have found to get the minerals back in the livestock, and especially in the right proportion, is through making what I call mineral water, which is taking a sea salt and putting it in a stock tank, and I'll get into that in a minute. But before I do that, kind of a reason to maybe want to do that is in Maynard Murray's book, Sea Energy Agriculture. They found that our blood, and maybe I should say mammal's blood, and seawater were the same 92 minerals in virtually the same proportions, except I think it was magnesium and iron were reversed. Otherwise, the other 90 minerals were all the same in ocean water in percentages as our blood. So they took a dog, took 90% of the blood out and replaced it with ocean water, and the dog lived. So ocean water, or this mineral water, which I'll describe in a minute, are the same as our blood. So 120 days to change out all the red blood cells in the body. That's on the way up or on the way down. So if we find ourselves in trouble, there are some shorter markers in there we can look at, but it's going to take us approximately 120 days when we get on the best feed that we can get. So if you have one stock tank, if it's not metal, and if it is on a float, there are other ways to describe this, but in a public setting, I like to start out there. What I like to do on Monday is, if I have 100 cows, I would like to have a 300-gallon tank so that I have a 3-gallon reserve per cow. Is that mandatory? No. If you have less, it'll just take longer to get the minerals in your cows. Anyway, you've got a stock tank. You know where the water comes in. You need to find the part of the tank where the water is the most calm. We're taking, well, if it's Redmond or Kansas, we're taking an ocean floor. The excess minerals and the out of balance minerals that settle to the ocean floor, we're going to be putting those into our stock tank. We don't want to stir up that ocean floor, so we want to put that tea bag in the most calm, the least disturbed part of our tank. Our tea bag, a woven polypropylene feed sack. You go to the feed store and you buy cob, corn, oats, barley. I think everybody's probably seen a bag like that. You've got a 300-gallon tank. You've got 100 cows. I would suggest put 50 pounds of the independent salt or the Redmond salt. If you're using the independent salt that has the anti-caking agent in it, and they all do, I can't say it that way. The blue and white bag from Independent Salt has the YPS in it, unless there is a NT after all the numbers in the lower left corner signifying no treat. If you're using the stuff with treat, make sure you tie the top of the bag, because that yellow prussiate of soda leaves the scum on the top of the water that the cattle don't like. Anyway, put 50 pounds of sea salt into your tea bag and place it in the calm portion of the tank Monday morning. Tuesday morning, 24 hours later, we come and you very carefully grab that tea bag, and as you're first lifting on it, there's no weight to it, but pretty quick, if you lifted another inch, it just got heavy. Very quickly jerk it out of the tank and throw it on the ground. What you're trying to accomplish is to leave the least amount of out of balance minerals in that tank. Any cloud that comes out of this tea bag is out of balance minerals. So Monday we put it in, we've got mineral water. Tuesday we took it out. Now we're back to fresh water. The cattle have to have fresh water at some point. We look in our tea bag. Once it's drained out, we're looking for a fist size amount of unused sea salt granules. I don't care how much mush or mud or whatever is in there. You've got some sea salt that has not been used. We know we had a little extra. That way we could make perfect seawater. If half of your salt was left, that was more than you needed. You can adjust on Wednesday morning with less. If there was no salt left, on Wednesday morning, you're going to want to put more salt in the bag. So you're putting it in on Monday, out on Tuesday, in on Wednesday, out on Thursday, in on Friday, out on Saturday, go to church Sunday, and start over again on Monday. So we got mineral water, fresh water, mineral water, fresh water, mineral water, and then the weekend is fresh water. I'm happy to answer any questions about that, but we're taking minerals that are in exactly the same balance as our livestock or ourselves, and we're giving that to them every other day. Other than to do 2 stock tanks, which is slightly different, this is the fastest way to get the exact proportion of minerals in your livestock that I have run across. Did I lose everybody?
You lost, did not lose me. Let me say it this way.
So if we've got 1 stock tank, it's not metal. It'll corrode, and like the galvanized ones, the water will turn black, and it's on a float. That's how you do that. If you've got the little Cobet waterers, you can't do this. If you've got a metal tank, you can't do it. It's plastic or a rubber tire tank. Those both work.
Yeah, what wonderful. Yeah, Steve, I think that's something that we should be putting in our newsletter sometime. That's pretty awesome. I appreciate that. I cannot tell you how many people that have now tried that and have really been able to benefit. And so, again, I appreciate that. Now, let me ask you. Go ahead.
Edwin, if I may, the reason this works so well is the cattle don't get tired of drinking or ingesting, I guess I should say, sodium chloride. We're putting 93% or more sodium chloride in that bag, but the water, if done correctly, is only 3.5%. So they'll just drink more minerals and drink more minerals and drink more minerals. At some point, they're going to get tired of sodium chloride dry and stop, and it just takes more and more enticer to try to get enough in them. In the dry form, those minerals are 20% bioavailable. In the mineral water, they're 50% or more, as attached to a carbon atom through a plant with photosynthesis. Now we're talking 90% bioavailable.
Yeah, that is totally amazing. No, I appreciate that really much. I really do. Let's go just briefly now. We're actually past our normal half hour, but we're going to extend this. It's doing so well, and I'd like to have you on in a future time frame as well. But would you just briefly talk to us some of the things that have been kind of outstanding to me when you look at making profit? I'm going to just kind of start you forward by some of your summaries that I feel like always have been powerful. The correct bull, the red solo cup cow, the soil fertility and mineral detox program, marketing, et cetera, et cetera. Would you comment on just a little enticement of what you may end up having with us sometime in the future, Steve?
The correct bull. Oh, man. A good cow can recreate herself in her daughters with a decent bull. It takes a really good bull for her to create better daughters and especially better sons. Well, we've been breeding for the feedlot for 60 years. We've been breeding for volume of milk for 60 years. Growth, production are on opposite ends of the teeter-totter of fertility. Now, fertility is in a beef herd, 40% of your profit is having a calf every year. 30% is what's it cost to keep that cow, to run that cow. 20% is growth and 10% carcass traits. Well, we've got so many cows with the tail process sticking up, as Gerald Fry used to call it, the grow bone sticking up. As I call it, the anti-fertility bone sticking up. Finding a bull that can correct that, in 90% of the herds that I go to, there'll have to be so many other things right about that bull. He's going to fix other problems in your cow herd if you can just find that bull whose hook bones are level with his backbone. As in, you watch him walk, and he's going from left to right, and as he weights his right leg, the right rear leg, that hook bone rotates slightly up above the backbone, and then he weights the left side, and that pelvis twists back the other way, and that left hook bone, you won't find this very often. Anyway, then the rump that rounds down a little bit more for calving ease, but there's butter fat, there's glandular function, a whole bunch of things go with that. You want a bull with a blocky head and wide shoulders. The more masculine the bull, the more he controls the length of gestation. The calf comes out 5, 10, 15 pounds lighter and then grows like gangbusters. The red solo cup cow. So Ken Redmond, for his master's thesis, he only used 9,500 cows, all the same breed, anywhere from Mexico to Canada. 3 commonalities with old cows. Cows that had 10 or 11 calves in a row without skipping a calf. A bigger belly than the herd average. They could eat and digest enough for 3 in a dry year. A wider butt than the herd average, which was calving ease, a wider pelvis, and fleshing ability. And third, and the one that became the most important for that 9th, 10th, 11th calf, was the slope from hooks down to pins. And I called Ken and asked him about that, and I got all the usual suspects, but not the one I was thinking of. If the pelvic floor is sloping back into the cow, which usually gives you a vulva that's sloped forward, and she's not digesting well, which means it's dirty, and the bull shows up, he takes some foreign material in there and she doesn't get pregnant, but that foreign material, the place it drains is back into the cow. She gets cystic ovaries and can't rebreed. The other thing that I would add to what Ken had in his analysis is sex hormones shut off long bone growth. So the taller an animal in any breed, the fewer sex hormones they're producing. Estrogen shuts off long bone growth in the front end of the cow first. So the more fertile cows, everything else being equal, are the ones that look like they're walking downhill on level ground. Thinking of the bottom of this solo cup, we've taken the plastic solo cup and turned it on its side, and the big end is the back of the cow and the little end is the front of the cow. So she's sloping from the front up towards the back on the top side. Well, looking at the bottom side, because she's got her bigger belly, it's sloping down into the back. The fewer acres it takes to run a cow, the farther off the ground that bottom line is going to be. The more acres it takes to run a cow, the closer to the ground that bottom line is going to be. But we didn't change the slope of that line. And I guess the other thing to say is early shedding. Shiny hair coat, or the first one to frizz out in the fall, is more fertile. Edmund, do you have something else in mind there?
No, that was good. That was outstanding. You were just giving it a nice summary to say within every breed, dairy included, there are productive profit-making animals, there are unproductive profit and lack of profit animals. And for our customers to be successful, we want to make sure they stay mindful of that, of becoming successful. It is also about operating with the proper understanding of what animal you're looking for. You have I'll call it the Serenity Prayer, paraphrased, and I just really love that. Would you mind repeating that?
Well, Edwin, I would love to, but I hope you have it in front of you. I just finally got my computer to turn on. I started an hour and a half ago, and it did some kind of an upgrade, and I don't have that right in front of me. So you're welcome to read it you're welcome to read that if you have it in front of you, but I do not have it in front of me right at the moment.
I think I may have, just a minute, and I think I may have that. I had it earlier, I saw it. I looked it up because I was just impressed with it so much. So just a minute here. Let's see. Let me find that. In the meantime, here it is. I've got it. I'm going to just cut to the chase. It says, God grant me the ability to sell the cows I never liked anyway, the good fortune to have mostly cows that do earn a profit, and the powers of observation and wisdom to tell the difference.
Okay. That was, yes, modified.
I know it was modified, but I kind of feel like it was modified for a very beneficial. It's kind of like that punch to the line that we're trying to look for when we have this short time on the call, that, folks, there is a real opportunity. The difference of making a profit and not is out there in spades. And I'd like to be sure that people have hope when they have this kind of, whether it's strictly dairy or beef, it doesn't matter. We're still down the same avenue that we want you to thrive. And so thank you for allowing us to share that as well. With that, Steve, let's have Gerald Keller come on briefly, and then we'll open it up to questions, and that'll be it then for this call. So, Gerald, are you on?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can. Thank you for joining us. And this, I hope, has been also worthwhile for you as well. But, Gerald, are there any comments or questions that you might have based on what we have been talking about?
I don't think so. You've said it very well. Now one thing I have noticed in relation to Steve, my mineral demand from my cows has dropped dramatically because of the higher quality nutrient dense feed that grass that they're eating.
Awesome. That's awesome.
The more of those minerals that come through the grass, the better. I mean, this is what God intended, and they're going to eat less grass, and fewer deficiencies means they're gonna reproduce better. They're gonna have higher bricks or mineral content in their milk. If you're doing dairy, milk solids will be all those things.
I've got one last question for Gerald, and then one last one for Steve, and then we'll open it up for other questions. So, Gerald, as you started back in 2014, and put your mind back to that, because there's many people that potentially are on the call that are saying, what really are we talking about? What are we really looking at? And your brother, Bob, and Jonathan, and thank God for your brother and Jonathan both, they both were involved with humus protein, the harvesting of that photosynthesis, so to speak, and they encourage you to start in with liquid humus extract. Would you talk about that a little, Gerald?
Well, I started in 2014 on the faith of my brother. 2014, I didn't see anything, but I was trusting his judgment and his direction, and it wasn't until 2017 that I realized it was working. We were moving in the right direction. I purchased the liquid humus extract from him early in the spring, stored it, used it all summer long. Every 30 to 35 days, I tried to apply it in my pastures. And, that's what led us to this point. So, one of the things that we have to get away from, we've been spoiled by immediate results with synthetic products. And in nature, you don't get immediate results. Nature is a walk of faith.
Interesting that you say that. I'm certainly grateful for what your observations are. And as we go along, we can do some short-term things to make sooner differences end up sooner. But truly, that is correct, that what got you into trouble doesn't necessarily jump back out of trouble right away. It does take some time also to get back out. Thank you for sharing that. I would like to use you some more, Gerald, coming up with some more teleclasses, and I appreciate you sharing so far. One last question for Steve, and then I'll open it up for more questions. Steve, when you look at managing the pastures, hay ground, and so on and so forth to synchronize with having a profitable beef enterprises, we know that God has placed you in the wonderful circles of influence where you have learned how to look at any kind of breed of cattle and help select for profit and get this operation profitable. But you've also observed grazing management principles and different things of the sort and so on. Do you have anything that comes to your mind in terms of paddock management or pasture management you'd like to share?
Good question. Three things. How well we put our pastures to bed in the fall will determine how quickly they jump out of the ground in the spring.
Oh, amen. Yeah. Thank you. Amen.
Yeah. So thinking about this clipping deal, I ran across the same result. Had no clue why it worked other than the fact that it worked, but it was that underground, everybody on the same page deal. But I had 400 and some odd steers together and I moved them twice a day, and I had quarter-mile long paddocks that were maybe 120 feet wide. So if they didn't eat it, they trampled it. And when I moved them out of there, everything was the same height. And I the next time around, it was 45 days later, and I was moving them once a day, and I gave them about 2.5 times space. But I had my uncle come in August, mid-August, who at the time he was mid-60s, and I was showing him all this grass that I had in front of the cattle, and he lived there in New Meadows his whole life, and he said, I have never seen this quality of grass in New Meadows in my life. Even the slough grass, the sedge grass, it would come back and the cattle would consume it. Normally before that, the only time that they would consume it was early in the spring when it was just first coming out of the ground and it was still palatable. So I didn't even know what I discovered other than this works. But until you explained the signals given underground and the amount of time that it took 5 days from now, this is what I'm going to need, that was huge for me, Edwin.
Steve, I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart, and we need to talk about that again some more on our next teleclass about how these things signal and interact underground. That is another teleclass call. You referred to it twice, and And as I think about it, we need to actually go into that in greater detail. I would love to have another repeat of this. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate that, Steve. Let's open it up for everyone else. At this point, are there any other questions that would like to be asked? Please ask that now. Anyone? And that's fine if there's not, but don't be afraid to speak up if you have a question. Well, let me see. Trying to remember here. Thought maybe we had a couple guys that were going to be on here that did have a question. Steve, I'm going to ask a question that was asked of us earlier today. What do you do if you know that you've got aflatoxins in the feed that you're feeding your cattle? And more specifically, we're talking a dairy operation that is not out there necessarily grazing all the time.
Oh, we don't have.
But they do have some.
Bad.
I'm sorry. Did someone speak up here? Let's see. Are you there, Steve?
I am here, yes, maybe.
I don't know if
what do you dial to unmute yourself? Is it star one or 1 star?
It is star 1, yes, to unmute yourself.
Well, maybe we need to say that.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah, I have everybody unmuted. Everybody should be unmuted.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you for that. If anyone has a question, feel free to speak up. And if not, I'm not wanting you to feel embarrassed if you don't, but go back to that question, Steve. What would you do if you knew you had toxins in the feed?
Well, if you have to feed it economically, you can't get rid of it and get something else. I would absolutely either be doing the activated charcoal and or the Redmond conditioner, which is a zeolite. And the Desert Dynamin or Desert Detox would be in that same family of products, but they're very effective at binding the mycotoxins.
Thank you for that. I think that's a good segue into another teleclass. I appreciate you just commenting about that. All right. Any other last questions that this prompted? If not, we'll go ahead and close out. Okay, I appreciate it. I'm mindful of all of your time, but I'm very, very grateful for those that have contributed. Thank you so much. And you all have a blessed Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.